He refused to shake a black CEO's hand, then she shut down $3B of his assets. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The lobby of Hale & Co. was quiet in that way. Expensive buildings often are soft lights, polished marble, and the faint hum of power people pretend not to feel. Then one sound sliced through it like a blade. Richard Hale Jr. laughed. Not a polite laugh, a sharp, echoing, theatrical laugh meant to be heard. Across from him, Dr. Amara Lewis stood perfectly still, her arm extended in a simple professional gesture, a handshake. She wore a cream suit, clean lines, quiet elegance. A brown leather briefcase hung from her shoulder, initials A.L. embossed in gold. Her posture was calm, steady, unmoved. Richard leaned back, still laughing, shaking his head as if she had just told the funniest joke of the decade. I don't touch staff. The words dropped into the lobby and detonated. Phones came up instantly. A small crowd of employees, some shocked, some amused, some pretending to check emails, angled their cameras to catch every second. The air tightened. Even the receptionist froze with her hand hovering above the keyboard. Amara didn't move her hand, didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. Is that so? Richard scoffed. Look, sweetheart, I appreciate the enthusiasm, really. But you don't just walk up to senior leadership for photo ops. If you want to pitch something, send an email like the rest of your department. A few employees exchanged looks. Your department, your kind of people, your place. The subtext wasn't subtle. It never is. Behind Richard, a young analyst, Maya, shifted, brow furrowing as she stared at Amara's briefcase. She recognized those initials. She'd seen them on a corporate document the night before. Her lips parted. Sir? Richard shot her a glare. Not now. Amara's hand was still extended, still waiting. But now it wasn't an invite. It was a mirror reflecting everything he assumed she was. Richard rolled his eyes dramatically. Are you done? You're holding up traffic. An older intern held her breath. A man in a gray blazer whispered, Jesus. Under it. The whole lobby felt pulled toward the moment, drawn tight like a bowstring just before the release. But Amara only lowered her hand slowly, gracefully. No anger, no embarrassment. Just intention. The kind of intention that doesn't need volume to become a threat. Well, she said, thank you for your clarity. Richard raised his chin. Good. Glad we understand each other. Then he stepped closer, too close, leaning in with a smirk that tried to be charming and landed somewhere between arrogant and venom. Next time, have your supervisor reach out. I'm sure they'll explain who's who around here. Some employees winced. Amara simply inhaled once. A memory flickered across her mind, being 24 and standing in another lobby. Another man calling her the delivery girl because she wore flats instead of heels. Being told she didn't fit the image. Being dismissed before saying a single word. Today felt like that memory returning. Except this time, she wasn't the girl trying to enter the building. She was the woman who owned part of it. Before the moment could shift, she turned slightly, facing the camera phones head on. Before we continue, she said softly, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. She paused. Now, back to Richard. Her eyes locked onto his with a calm that unsettled everyone, even those who didn't fully understand why. Something was coming. The lobby felt it. The cameras felt it. And Richard, still smirking, was the only one who didn't. The moment Richard walked away, still shaking his head, still laughing to himself, the lobby exhaled. Phones lowered, whispers rose, and the space settled into that uneasy tension people feel when they've just witnessed something wrong, but aren't sure if they're allowed to say it. Amara didn't chase him, didn't correct him. didn't announce a title, or flash a badge, or pull rank. She simply adjusted the strap of her brown briefcase and stepped deeper into the lobby, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who belongs not because she was welcomed, but because the truth was larger than the room. As she walked, her presence drew eyes for reasons beyond the scene minutes earlier. It was the clarity in her shoulders, the measured breath, the silence that moved with authority even when spoken words didn't. An intern whisper hissed to her coworker, "Who is she?" Someone else muttered, "Probably from HR." Another shrugged, "Consultant maybe. They always carry those fancy bags." Amara heard it all, not because she tried, but because this wasn't the first lobby where people tried to shrink her down to what they assumed she must be. She approached the security check-in scanner. The guard, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a forced corporate smile, tapped the desk politely. "Ma'am, visiting staff need to sign in." "Department?" Amara offered a small, kind smile. "Not staff." The guard blinked, confused. "Oh, contractor then? Executive assistant?" Her eyes flicked briefly to the initials on the briefcase. "Is that the corporate monogram?" "I've seen that design on upper management cases." Amara didn't confirm or deny. She lifted her wrist, showing a simple black bracelet, sleek, unbranded, but embedded with a faint metallic seam along its edge. "Access pass," she said. The guard hesitated. "Looks custom." "It is." She tapped the bracelet gently against the scanner. The machine didn't beep, it clicked. A sound no one in the lobby recognized, not the cheerful acceptance beep of badge scans, not the denial buzz either. A deeper, internal click, like something waking up. The screen lit gold instead of blue. "Access level, Sigma, verified. Welcome, Dr. Lewis." The guard's mouth fell open. She looked from the screen to Amara, back to the screen. "Ma'am, I didn't realize." "It's all right," Amara said softly. "Most don't." "That's the point." Behind her, Maya the young analyst stared, eyes widening. She had heard the name Lewis before. She had seen signatures in acquisition documents. She remembered a late-night spreadsheet labeled, "Hale Restructure, Pending Ownership Transfer." And suddenly, the initials on the briefcase made sense. Before Maya could speak, the elevator dinged. Amara stepped inside. Several employees watched, unsure if they should follow or stay back. Richard, now across the lobby telling two managers some exaggerated, embellished version of what happened, didn't even glance her way. But the cameras were still rolling, phones still raised, eyes still tracking her ascent. As the elevator doors slid shut, a soft metallic reflection caught her gaze, her own eyes, steady, relentless, carved from years of being underestimated. Quiet entrance, quiet room, quiet woman. But quiet didn't mean small. Quiet was preparation. She placed one hand against the railing, inhaled once, and let the past flicker again. Memories of every wrong floor, every "you don't look like an executive," every boardroom she wasn't allowed into until she walked in as the majority shareholder. People always saw the outfit, the bag, the silence. They never saw the architecture of power beneath it. Ding. The doors opened to the 34th floor executive level. A corridor lined with portraits of leadership stretched ahead, including one empty frame waiting at the end. The one meant for her. In the quiet, she whispered to herself not a promise, not a threat, just the truth she had earned. They're about to learn who walks their halls. Then she stepped forward. No rush, no tremor, only purpose, because power didn't always arrive loud. Sometimes, it arrived exactly like this. The 34th floor had a different atmosphere, quieter, colder, carved from steel and money. The kind of place where decisions didn't just change spreadsheets, they changed cities. Amara stepped out of the elevator, heels tapping softly across marble so polished it reflected the ceiling lights like a surface of still water. The hush of the hallway wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that only existed in rooms where power concentrated, thick and invisible. A receptionist at the executive desk straightened when she saw Amara approaching, young, sharp suit, immaculate posture. "Good morning," she said carefully. "May I help you? This floor is restricted to senior leadership and authorized visitors." Amara offered a polite nod. I'm here for the governance meeting. The receptionist blinked. I'm sorry, governance. That's invite only. You must be from operations. They meet on 28. End quote. Behind the receptionist, two senior managers stepped out of the boardroom mid-conversation. When they spotted Amara, they paused, then exchanged looks that landed somewhere between surprise and mild annoyance. One of them, a man in a gray suit, with a clipped tone and clipped patience, approached with a tight smile. "Miss, sorry, miss?" He gestured vaguely at her badgeless lapel. "Dr. Lewis," she said. "Oh." He cleared his throat. "Right. Well, unfortunately, this is a closed-door session. You're welcome to wait downstairs. Someone from HR can help you find your coordinator." Coordinator. Downstairs. HR. She had heard every version of it before. From inside the boardroom, Richard's voice rang out loud, confident, dismissive in its own echo. "And I handled it." She was obviously confused about her place here. "We can't just let anyone walk into our corporate space expecting handshakes." Laughter spilled out, a low wave of agreement. Amara didn't react, not yet. She simply glanced at the receptionist's screen. A calendar glowed across it. Hale & Co. Emergency Governance Session. Topic: Strategic Fund Realignment, $3B Portfolio. Present: Board members, CFO, Interim COO, and one seat marked: Reserved Dr. A. Lewis. The receptionist followed her gaze and froze. Oh my God," she whispered. "That's you." Before Amara could answer, Richard stepped out of the boardroom, holding a coffee like it was a trophy. He spotted her immediately, and his expression collapsed into irritation. "You again?" he snapped. "Didn't we settle this downstairs?" Several managers watched from behind him. The way people watch a fire they're not sure they should put out. Amara stood still. "I'm here for the governance meeting." Richard snorted. "No, you're not. This floor is for decision makers." He gestured toward the elevators. "If you need the cafeteria or HR, wrong level." A few executives chuckled. A few grimaced. A few filmed. The air grew heavy, tighter, as though the walls themselves leaned in. "You can't be here," Richard said louder, as if volume somehow made him right. "This meeting is for corporate leadership and primary stakeholders. And you," he scanned her outfit, lingering in that judgmental way that tries to shrink a person into something easy to dismiss. "You are clearly neither." "It is reasoned." Maya, who had quietly slipped up from the lower floors, approached just in time to hear the last line. "Sir," she said, voice wavering, "I really think you should." "Maya," Richard barked, "go back to your desk." She didn't move. For the first time, her voice didn't crack. "Dr. Lewis is on the list." Richard turned sharply. "She's not. I created the list." The receptionist swallowed. "Actually, she is." Then the tension snapped like a thread pulled too tight. Richard stepped closer to Amara, jaw tight, voice low but venomous. "You're embarrassing yourself. Leave before we have security escort you." Phones rose again. Breaths hitched. Every pair of eyes locked on them. But Amara didn't blink. She simply shifted the briefcase in her hand, her voice calm, almost tender in its restraint. "Richard," she said, "you're absolutely right about one thing." He smirked, waiting for validation that would never come. "This floor," she continued, "is for decision makers." A murmur rippled. Her eyes were steady, unbothered. "And today, your decisions are the ones being evaluated." The hallway went silent. Something was unraveling. Something was about to break open. And Richard, still smirking, still blind, was standing right in the center of it. For a long second, the hallway remained frozen, exactly as it was, Richard looming forward, Amara standing serene and unbothered, executives hovering behind him like shadows unsure of which direction power would tilt. Then, quietly, softly, the first shift happened. Maya stepped closer. Not dramatically, not heroically, just one small, trembling step, like someone deciding they were done being silent. Her hands shook slightly as she held her tablet against her chest. "Sir," she said, voice cracking at first, "Dr. Lewis is on the governance list." Richard didn't turn, didn't blink, didn't even acknowledge her. He just exhaled through his nose, the way people do when they believe they're too important to be corrected. "Maya," he said, "please stop embarrassing yourself." "I'm not," she replied, quieter, but firmer. "I saw her name yesterday on the internal documents for the restructuring review." That made a few executives tense. Restructuring review? Whose name? Her name? Amara watched Maya silently, sensing the internal battle behind the young analyst's eyes. She knew that look, knew it from herself years ago when the urge to speak the truth outweighs the fear of consequences. Richard finally spun around, annoyance sharp and poorly concealed. "Maya, listen carefully. I appreciate your attempt to participate, really, but you're confused. Dr. Lewis," he waved a dismissive hand toward Amara, "does not work at Hale & Co. She's probably with a consulting firm trying to angle for an invite." The receptionist winced. Several employees who had followed from downstairs exchanged glances. Amara didn't speak. She didn't need to. Maya inhaled. "Sir," she signed the governance briefing. It had her initials on. Richard raised a hand. "Enough." But Maya didn't stop. For the first time since the lobby, someone else chose the truth over fear. "You didn't read the addendum," she said, louder this time. "I did. Last night. Dr. Lewis isn't a consultant. She's not external staff. She's not an executive," Richard snapped, his voice echoing down the hallway like a slap. "And I don't know what delusion she's fed you, but I promise you she is not." "Yes, she is." Another voice, calmer, older. All heads turned. A woman, in her mid-50s, Miss Sarah Whitlock, Senior Compliance Director, stepped out of a side office with a printed binder in her hand. She wasn't filming. She wasn't whispering. She simply looked tired of watching something wrong unfold. "I reviewed the documents myself," she said. "Her clearance level is above yours, Richard." The silence changed shape, no longer tense, but expectant. Richard's smirk faltered, twitching at the corner like a glitch. "That's impossible," he laughed. "Above me? Please. I'm Hale's acting COO. No one outranks." "She does," Sarah replied. "In fact, she outranks all of us except the board." A ripple shot through the hallway. One executive dropped his pen. Another lowered her phone slowly as realization hit. Richard's face drained of color. What are you talking about?" Maya looked at Amara with something like awe, a spark of vindication lighting in her eyes. Sarah flipped open the binder, turning it toward the room. "Hale & Co. Ownership Registry. Updated last quarter." She tapped a line highlighted in gold. "Primary stakeholder, Dr. Amara Lewis, 18% holding." Gasps scattered like falling pins. Amara didn't move, didn't smile, didn't savor the moment. She simply watched the truth rearrange the room. Richard laughed, a brittle, cracking sound. No, there must be some kind of clerical." Maya added quietly, "I told you." Executives shifted subtly behind Amara now. Not because they suddenly liked her, but because power had gravity and now they could feel exactly where it was. Richard swallowed hard, but pride pushed him forward anyway. He jabbed a finger at Sarah. Even if that's true, she still doesn't belong up here without my authorization." That was when the elevator dinged again. Carla's voice came through the speaker of Amara's bracelet, calm, crisp, undeniable. "Dr. Lewis, Protocol Sigma is armed. All Hale & Co. financial channels are synced, awaiting your go." Accepted. Every phone lifted. Every breath hitched. Every eye locked onto the woman Richard had called staff. Amara turned to Maya first, meeting her eyes with a quiet nod. "Thank you for speaking." Then she stepped past Richard, who instinctively moved aside without thinking, and said, "Let's begin." The floor had shifted. The room had shifted. The story had shifted. And for the first time since she entered the building, everyone finally understood who she was. The boardroom doors were still half open, leaking out the low murmurs of the executives inside, but the real storm was gathering in the hallway, tightening, coiling, ready to snap. Richard stood rigid, gripping the edge of a glass conference table, as if bracing against a wave he still believed he could stop. His jaw worked, eyes darting between Amara, Sarah, the hovering phones, the employees watching like witnesses in an unfolding trial. Then he did something that told everyone without question that the breaking point had arrived. He reached for Amara's briefcase. Not gently, not accidentally, not even discreetly. He yanked it. The leather strap slid off her shoulder, the case nearly hitting the floor before she caught it with one hand. Gasps erupted. A few people cursed under their breath. Sarah froze mid-step. Maya stepped forward instinctively. Richard's voice cracked. You don't get to walk in here and pretend you're someone you're not. Amara straightened slowly, one hand still on the briefcase, the other resting lightly at her side. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move toward him. She didn't even look angry. But something shifted in her eyes, a depth, a memory, a returning ghost. Because she had seen this exact moment before. A man grabbing her things like they belonged to him. A man using his entitlement like a weapon. A man assuming she was trespassing in a room built on rules he thought were made for people like him. She remembered being 27, standing in a venture capital lobby in San Francisco. The managing partner had taken her presentation binder not because he needed it, but because he didn't believe she owned it. He'd flipped through it with a smirk and said, "Did someone prepare this for you?" She'd walked out with her dignity intact. He'd retired 3 years later after her firm bought his. The memory settled in her chest now, quiet but sharp. She lifted her gaze to Richard. "Don't touch my property again." He laughed a high, disbelieving sound. "What are you going to do? File a complaint? Send HR an angry email? You don't have authority here. You never did." Sarah stepped in. "Richard, stop," she outranks. He cut her off. "No, I am not taking orders from some imposter." That was it. Not the words, not the volume, not even the insult. It was the certainty in his voice, the certainty of a man who truly believed nothing could break the system he benefited from. Maya whispered under her breath, "He's digging his own grave." Amara exhaled once, a slow, controlled release. Then she tapped the bracelet on her wrist. A faint chime sounded soft, melodic, but so unnaturally out of place in the tense hallway that it stopped everyone mid-movement. Carla's voice flowed through the hidden speaker, crisp and calm. "Dr. Lewis, Sigma Protocol is in standby. Do you want full activation?" Richard paled. What is that? What did you just do?" Sarah opened her binder, scanning frantically. "Oh my God, Sigma isn't advisory, it's..." Amara finished for her. "Ownership enforcement." Phones rose higher. The room leaned in. Richard sputtered. "Stop pretending. You're not in charge of anything." To Ben. Amara lifted her briefcase back to her shoulder, folding the strap neatly, movements elegant and controlled. Then she stepped into his space, not aggressively, not dramatically, but with the presence of someone who finally chooses to stop carrying other people's ignorance. "Richard," she said softly, "you didn't refuse my handshake." He blinked. Thrown. "What?" "You refused my humanity." Richard's throat bobbed. "And that," she continued, "is the last mistake you make as a leader in this company." Sarah whispered, "Oh, he's finished." But the eyes in the hallway weren't on Richard anymore. They were on Amara, still calm, still steady, still commanding the air without raising a single decibel. Phones recorded. Breaths held. And with one quiet nod, she spoke the words that signaled the storm's arrival. "Carla, initiate Sigma." And the system came alive. The moment Amara said, "Carla, initiate Sigma," the atmosphere changed with the precision of a dropped guillotine. The lights didn't flicker, nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic in the conventional sense, but every executive phone in the hallway buzzed at the exact same time. A sharp, synchronized vibration that rippled like a warning siren hiding behind glass. Then came the second sound, an even deeper tremor. Ping, ping, ping. Alerts cascading through devices, tablets, laptops, watches. Richard looked around wildly. What is happening?" Sarah flipped her binder open, scanning page after page, until she found the Sigma clause, her eyes widening as she read. "Sigma it's an ownership override protocol," she whispered. "It's only issued when the primary stakeholder declares a full structural breach." Maya leaned closer. Meaning what? Meaning, Sarah said, the company stops listening to everyone except her. End quote. At that exact moment, Carla's voice flowed through Amara's bracelet, calm as a surgeon's hand. Dr. Lewis, we have locked all Hale & Co. digital channels, liquid assets, frozen. Derivatives, frozen. Fund transfers, disabled. All outgoing orders now require your biometric approval. A gasp swept the hallway. Richard's face drained. He looked down at his phone, now blinking red with notifications. Account privileges suspended. Executive access revoked. Authorization reassigned, Dr. A. Lewis. No, this isn't real, he muttered, tapping the screen desperately. This has to be a glitch. I need IT. But an email popped up before he could finish shouting. From Corporate Systems. Subject: Authority Transfer. Notice: due to Ownership Directive Sigma, your access has been restricted. The hallway erupted into murmurs. Is this really happening? She shut down the entire system. That's billions, right? 3 billion, Maya whispered. Minimum. I could. Richard stumbled backward, bumping into the glass wall. You can't do this. I outrank I am. This is my company. Amara turned to him with the softest expression, yet almost sympathetic, but not quite. No, Richard, it's your family's name on the wall. That's not the same thing. He grabbed at a passing VP. Tell her she can't do this. The VP didn't even look at him. He looked at Amara. Dr. Lewis, what are your instructions? That subtle pivot, one man turning toward her instead of him, was the first domino. The hallway shifted around them, bodies angling, eyes redirecting, the gravitational center of the floor pulling decisively toward her. But Amara stayed steady, centered, unbothered by the sudden deference. This wasn't the moment she savored. This was the moment she controlled. Carla, she said, connect me to the board. Already done, Carla replied. They're waiting. Is this? Richard shoved past two analysts, face twisted with panic. No, you can't speak to them without me. I lead governance. They need. The boardroom door opened. 3 board members stood inside, silent, expression unreadable. One of them, Chairwoman Evelyn Crown, spoke first. Dr. Lewis, thank you for joining us. We've been expecting your call. Richard spun, betrayal written across his face. Expecting what? Expecting what? Evelyn didn't answer him. Her attention was solely on Amara. Is Sigma active? She asked. Yes, Amara said. Then we'll proceed under your direction. The executives murmured again, this time not in confusion but in recognition. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't symbolic. This was power manifesting exactly the way it was designed to. Richard grabbed the edge of the doorframe. You can't just ignore me. I run this division. You ran this division, Evelyn corrected. Until the primary stakeholder intervened. Asked. Amara stepped forward, not aggressive, not theatrical, just inevitable. Richard, she said, I asked you for a handshake. His voice broke. That's not a valid reason to activate Sigma. No, she replied. But what came after was, phones lifted higher, executives leaned in, silence sharpened. You didn't refuse my handshake, she continued softly. You refused every principle this company claims to stand on. Richard's breathing hitched. For the first time, he realized the room wasn't witnessing a feud. It was witnessing a transition. And Amara wasn't rising. She had already arrived. Carla, Amara said, never taking her eyes off him. Begin compliance extraction. Yes, Dr. Lewis. Starting now. And like that, the turn was complete. The first sign that Part 7 had begun wasn't sound. It was stillness. The kind that folds into a room when people realize they're not watching an argument. They're watching history rearrange itself in real time. Compliance extraction had barely begun on Carla's end when the boardroom screens lit up at once. Graphs, charts, asset lines, and every redirection of Hale & Co.'s $3B portfolio flickered across the glass walls like a financial X-ray. Executives gasped, some stepping backward, others stepping closer to see the extent of the shift. Richard stood dead center, swallowed by numbers he once believed he controlled. "Stop it," he shouted, voice cracking. "Shut it down, now." But the systems didn't listen to him anymore. They listened to her. Amara stepped into the boardroom, not rushed, not vindictive, just present like a truth, finally choosing the moment to reveal itself. Evelyn Crown, the board chairwoman, gestured toward the seat at the table's head. "Dr. Lewis," she said with professional solemnity, "your chair." Gasps trembled through the room. Richard spun. Her chair? Her? She can't be. But Evelyn had already opened the governance ledger, and with a single sweep of her finger, she turned it toward him, toward everyone. There it was, in clean, bold serif type. Primary stakeholder Dr. Amara Lewis. Equity holding, 18%. Governance priority, level sigma. Richard's voice collapsed into silence. Not willingly, because his lungs simply forgot how to push sound out. Maya stepped just inside the doorway, breath caught in her throat. Sarah stood beside her, watching Richard's worldview crumble like a bad foundation. Amara walked to the head of the table and placed her briefcase down, gently. Her presence didn't shout. It didn't need to. The room filled around her, not the other way around. Richard finally managed to speak, barely a whisper. You used Sigma to embarrass me." Amara shook her head lightly. "No, I used Sigma to correct you." His face twisted. "What correction?" "I made a judgment call." "Yes," she said. "A biased one, a reckless one. One that endangered your investors, your compliance team, and the future of this firm." Her eyes didn't soften, but they didn't harden either. They simply held truth with no anger left to fuel anything else. "You didn't just refuse my handshake," she continued. "You dismissed my identity, my presence, my role, and the authority of the systems that govern you." Her voice grew quieter still. "And you did it in front of your team, your staff, your witnesses." Dozens of phones raised slightly higher. A growing circle of bystanders had gathered around the boardroom's open entrance employees from multiple floors, drawn by the alerts, by the tension, by the unraveling of the hierarchy they thought was untouchable. Amara tapped her bracelet once. Carla's voice filled the room. "Dr. Lewis, Hale & Co. Assets have been secured. All executive actions are now routed through your approval." Silence hit like a shock wave. Richard stumbled backward until he hit the edge of a leather chair. "You shut down my company." "No," Amara said. "I shut down your access." Then she opened her briefcase and placed a single document on the table, a transfer authorization, embossed with the company seal. "Before you refused my hand," she said, "I came to offer you co-governance on the restructuring plan. You were going to have a seat at the next phase of Hale & Co.'s future." Richard's breath shattered. He stared at the document, recognition dawning too late. You were going to elevate me?" "I was," she replied softly. "Until you proved you weren't ready to lead." The boardroom rippled with disbelief. Amara lifted the document, tore it cleanly down the middle, and laid both halves neatly on the table. Then she said the line that froze the entire floor, the line that went viral in every recording, the line that staff replayed for months. "You called me staff in a company I own. Now you answer to me." Phones caught it from every angle. Richard staggered. The reveal was complete. Not because she announced her power, but because she made him confront the truth of it. And the room would never forget the way his expression broke when he finally realized he hadn't underestimated her. He had exposed himself. The collapse didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived with silence. The kind that sinks into a room when the center of power shifts and everyone feels it at once. Richard stood in the middle of the boardroom, like a statue carved out of disbelief. His mouth moved, but no words came out. His eyes darted from screen to screen, watching the lifeblood of his authority, the assets, the authorizations, the controls slip out of his hands and reroute into Amara's. Carla's calm voice flowed through the ceiling speakers now, synced to the room's system. Compliance extraction complete. Richard Hale's access revoked. Cross-department permissions suspended. Audit trail locked. A murmur rippled across the executives. He's been fully removed. That's everything. Oh my God, that includes the investment arm. Richard lunged toward a terminal. Override. Hail priority override. Recognize my ID. Access denied code Sigma. The denial flashed red across every screen in the room. He slammed his hand against the desk. This is abuse of power. You can't strip an acting COO without a board vote. Evelyn looked at him coolly. Dr. Lewis is the vote. Gasps. A shift. A fracture deeper than the floor. Richard turned to the others for support, but no one moved. A few looked away. A few stared at the table. And some simply held their phones, recording, documenting the moment leadership collapsed under its own arrogance. Amara finally rose from her seat. She didn't raise her chin. She didn't loom over him. She didn't need to. Her presence did the work for her. Richard, she said quietly, you weren't removed because of one moment. You were removed because that moment revealed who you've always been in this building. He shook his head, voice breaking. You humiliated me. No, she replied. You humiliated yourself. I simply turned the lights on. Sarah stepped forward, reading from the binder. Per Governance Clause 7C, effective immediately, you are relieved of all duties pending investigation for misconduct, bias-based obstruction, and breach of fiduciary responsibility. Richard stared at her like he didn't recognize the world anymore. Employees outside the boardroom parted, forming a walkway. Not in respect for him, but in acknowledgement of what had just happened. He stumbled toward the door. No one stopped him. No one touched him. No one spoke his name. As he reached the hallway, one analyst whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. He should have shaken her hand. Cameras caught it. The crowd murmured. Richard's shoulders curled inward. Amara watched him go, not triumphant, not spiteful, just resolute. Then, with the soft authority of someone who no longer needed to prove a single thing, she turned back to the room, reset the structure, begin the new chain of governance, and call everyone affected by his decisions. We rebuild from truth, not ego. The executives nodded. The collapse was complete. The boardroom slowly emptied of tension, but the air didn't relax, it recalibrated. People stood straighter, voices lowered. The atmosphere shifted from chaos to purpose, as if the building itself understood that something fundamental had changed. But the center of it all, Amara, remained perfectly still. She stepped toward the panoramic window overlooking the city, its skyline framed in muted gold by the late morning sun. Behind her, executives waited, unsure whether to stay or leave. Sarah held the binder at her chest like a reporter bracing for a verdict. Maya lingered near the door, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and relief. Amara rested her hands lightly on the glass table. For a long moment, she said nothing. Silence wasn't a pause for her. It was architecture. She let it settle, let it land, let everyone in the room feel the weight of what had happened. Then she spoke. When I was 22, she began softly, I walked into my first corporate meeting with a full proposal and a borrowed suit. The receptionist sent me to the service elevator because she assumed I was delivering lunch. The room stilled. Phones lowered. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet. I spent years being told I didn't belong in spaces I was building toward. Years being told to wait my turn. Years being evaluated by people who didn't know the value of what I carried. Her eyes drifted across the glass walls, as if she could see every version of herself reflected there, every rejection, every dismissal, every forced smile. And today, she continued, a man refused my handshake, not because of protocol, not because of rank, because he thought he already knew who I was. She turned then, fully facing the room. Her voice didn't rise, but it deepened, anchored, resolute, unshakable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw a chair. I didn't shout my title. I simply let the truth speak louder than his ego. Maya exhaled shakily, tears glimmering in her lashes. Amara stepped toward the table, placing both hands firmly on its surface. Leadership is not a performance. It's not volume. It's not intimidation. Leadership is accountability. And the moment someone in power forgets that this happens, in quote, she gestured toward the empty hallway where Richard had disappeared moments earlier. It's time this company stops rewarding arrogance and starts protecting dignity. Sarah nodded, eyes shining as if hearing something she'd long hoped someone would finally say. Amara looked at every face in the room, executives, analysts, assistants, witnesses holding each gaze with quiet gravity. From this day forward, she said, no one in this building will be judged by their appearance before their merit. No one will have their voice dismissed because of assumptions. And no one will be denied respect they rightfully deserve. A beat. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can follow Richard out the door. A sharp inhale rang through the room. Then, applause. Not polite, not gentle, not performative, real, earnest, grateful. Maya stepped forward, voice trembling but full. Dr. Lewis, thank you for saying what so many of us felt but never dared to say. Amara placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're not alone. Not anymore. She lifted her chin, eyes blazing with purpose. Now let's rebuild this place into the company it was meant to be. And with those words, Hale & Co. didn't just survive its reckoning. It stepped into a new era, one defined not by fear, not by hierarchy, but by truth. By her truth. ChatGPT kete makloi. OpenAI kung sudung.